Welcome to this new year. This time I hope and pray of new insights. We know that it's a new world. Things have changed. The world, as Alice Walker reminds us, has changed. And so, the God in whom I trust will lead us to new revelations, new light, new direction for the church, for the people of God. An Epiphany. Today, of course, the church around the world celebrates this Epiphany Sunday. An epiphany, as we use in common parlance, means a visible manifestation, particularly a manifestation of God among us. An insight, a realization, even perhaps a call by God in us and through us. Manifestation, a new understanding, a surprise, a new learning. Light on the subject, as it were. A vision of God's presence, God's glory. And as I suggested in the Chimes message this week, just as during Advent, we don't really wait for the baby Jesus, because the baby Jesus came a long time ago. We wait for a new realization of the Christ born in us. So on this Epiphany Sunday, we don't really watch the night sky for that wandering star to grace the heavens to light our way as it did for the Magi. But I do hope that we'll watch for something. That we'll seek something of God's direction to be revealed to us, given to us, shown to us as we traverse our way to a new birth of Christ. In our biblical Epiphany story, this journey and the guidance to find God's revelation in Jesus is symbolized by the journey of the Magi and the presence of the light, the star. Now, the Magi, and we hear this many ways. We three kings, the three wise men. First of all, we don't know if there were three. There may have been 30. We don't know that. But the Magi were actually astrologers, not astronomers. They were actually astrologers. They looked for spiritual messages in the stars. And so they were doing what they always did. They were going through their life's calling, watching stars. But the world wasn't doing what the world always did. The heavens weren't doing what the heavens always did. So they were going about their life's work when they saw the light of God. When they saw this star moving, a new star. And so what did they do? Did they sit in curiosity and say, that's weird? They didn't. When the star moved, they moved also. A really important thing to remember. The world has changed. And so do we sit back and say, the world has changed? Or do we take that as our sign, as our epiphany, that we too are to move, to change when the world changes, and see that as a call and a sign from God? They acted based on what the world gave them. They looked for spiritual messages in the stars, and they explored the contradictions, open to what the universe and therefore God had to reveal. They believed somehow that all things worked together to reveal life's picture and God's presence. Peter Chrysologus in the 5th century has a beautiful poetic writing of the importance of the Magi. He relates the cosmic Christ, in other words, the Christ presence that has always existed with God. He relates that to the human infant Jesus. Listen, he writes this. Today the Magi find crying in a manger the one they have followed as he shone in the sky. Today the Magi see clearly in swaddling clothes the one they have long awaited as he lay hidden among the stars. Today, the Magi gaze in deep wonder at what they see. Heaven come to earth, earth in heaven. Humanity in God, God in humanity, one whom the whole universe cannot contain. now enclosed in a tiny body. Epiphany, seeing the light of God in the heavens and in a baby. Seeing the light of God means that we experience a breakthrough. A solution has come to us. We found a better way, a direction for this very time in this changing world. As the world is changing, we, the church, have a choice. It's a similar choice to the one the Magi made. We can either pretend that the world isn't changing, pretend that the church doesn't need to change, use the same old language that we've always used, with the same old theologies we've always held, have the same expectations of what the church is and how we are supposed to be as followers of Christ in the world. Or we can look for God's revelation, God's light and direction that's different, because the world is different. And then we can be willing to change, to do things, to do faith, to do church differently. Now, I believe this. I believe that all of us long to see the light. All of us long to have life's meanings and secrets revealed to us, because humans know what life is like without light. We know this physically and we know it spiritually. Spiritual writers through the ages have written of experiencing a dark night of the soul. Most of us can know what that phrase means. We know what it's like to lose our way, to meet crises and hopelessness, to be really, really, really afraid of the course of our nation or our world or even our own lives. We know times of deep darkness, personally, economically, globally, and spiritually. In these times, who is God to us, for us, through us, with us? How do we know or experience or trust the light of God for these all too present problems? You know, there wasn't much light, wasn't much brightness in Judea at the time of King Herod, the time when Jesus was born. In fact, Herod's reign was marked by violence and bloodshed. Herod killed his brother-in-law, his uncle, and then his wife. Talk about mass murder. Fearing his own loss of power, he went on to execute his mother-in-law and his 3 sons. Caesar Augustus remarked that he would much rather be Herod's pig than Herod's son. And we know about the massacre of the infants, which he ordered in a desperate attempt to kill the infant Jesus. Doesn't seem so different than current headlines of wars and shooting and self-indulgent governance, does it? More of the same. Division, exploitation, fear, and abuse of power. We struggle with the same extremes, rich and poor, conservative and liberal, the rights of a few over the rights of all. I recently heard about a man here in Atlanta who is afraid. He sees only the shadows of today's fear-mongering political terrain. He's watched way too much Fox News, seriously, and is overcome with hopelessness and fear. He's come to believe somehow that Obamacare will end private and therefore quality, he thinks, health care. He's so afraid that he will get sick and won't be able to get what he needs because the lines will be too long with people who don't deserve it. We long to see the light, but through fear-mongering, through our own personal doubts, we just can't find it. Just can't determine God's way through. One of the wonders of our physical world is that it is absolutely full of light. Even on dark and gloomy January days, it's full of light. But only a tiny sliver of the earth's light is visible to humans. Did you know that? Our eyes can only detect light with relatively short wavelengths. All other forms of light are invisible to our eyes. But we can see that shortwave light very, very well. a wonderful ability to have in a world that's so full of the visible light of the sun and the reflected light of the moon. This light gives us clarity and direction and warmth and, as we know now, serotonin. But there's another form of radiance that is available to all of us. Another wavelength, as it were, that can bring light into our lives. This light is sometimes called the glory of God, the Shekinah, the glory that shone around them as they watched for Christ's birth. The indwelling, joyful movement and light of God that is alive in our world right now. I ask you this week to think about how you see it, about how you feel it, about ways that you want it and need the light of God. Come, Paula and Jill, and tell us of the epiphanies in your life.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My epiphany, my wake-up call was when I got the call that I had lung cancer. And that was a change that I had to make in my life. And I've asked for prayers from all of you. And I truly believe that this Friday, when I have my CT scan, that the cancer will be gone. All of you have gotten me through this journey. I can only say thank you, and God bless you, and know that change is good, and change will always happen. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's hard to navigate getting up here. When I was about 7 years old, my brother was killed in a car accident. And one day my mother came home after maybe a week after he had died, maybe a month, and she'd seen a car accident. And there was a little boy, there was like a teenage boy laying on the road, and the ambulance was taking him home. And of course it really upset her because this had just happened to her, and so she was just sobbing. And she came in, and I was still 7, and I said, "You know what I think, Mom?" I don't remember saying this at all. I think that when you die and it's not your time to go, that God says, well, do you want to stay with me or do you want to go back? So Derek wanted to go, and God wanted him. Now, I don't remember saying that, but then I went through a period of time about a year ago where I was just like, God doesn't talk to me, God doesn't use me, God doesn't really care much about me, He's got better things to do, and I'll move on. And one of those awful pet commercials, those awful pet torture commercials that come on, oh my gosh. So I had to flip the channel really quick, and it went to channel 8, and there was Wayne Dyer. And he was talking to the woman who wrote the Dying to Be Me book. And they were talking about different things and all that. And then he said, but you were given a choice, right? And she said, yeah. I was told that if I wanted to go with God, it wasn't my time to go, but if I wanted to, I could. Or I could choose to come back. So God came and found me again.
Thank you. I hope these testimonies invite you to reflect on how the light of God comes to you. This light of God, as you have heard in these stories, can be intense. It can be guiding, illuminating, even demanding and frightening. But its substance, the light of God, the substance is always love and hope. And our spiritual eyes can pick up this divine light even in times of deep darkness. There's always some light to be found. You know, shadow experts, people who study shadows, tell us that we would have to go to the moon to even find a shadow that does not have light in it. On earth, every shadow contains a little bit of light. This is true for spiritual and emotional shadows as well as physical ones. A lost job, a failed exam. As Paula has testified, even a horrible diagnosis. To act in selfish and unloving ways, a struggle with tension in a relationship. All these places of shadow have slivers of light in them. Nothing on earth is without light because God is always present. If we're willing to search for the light of God in times of deep darkness, we will find it. If we look for God with us, the presence of Christ, even in situations of trouble, we will find it. My epiphanies, my glimpses of holy light almost always come when it's darkest in my soul. I've learned through the years to sit with these dark moments, not to fight them away. Confused and overwhelmed, only faintly trusting that insight will come. This darkness, the wrongs that happen to us, frustrations or anxieties, are a signal to look for the faith and hope. To separate the disappointments, the fears, the darkness of the shadow, the struggle from the light and presence of God that's found within them. To find the gratitude that pulls back the curtain of despair to reveal the light of God. The primary symbol of the Epiphany is the Magi, those who kept their focus on the light through it all. They changed course. They followed the star, the source of the light. Outside their, they weren't Jews, and yet they followed the star of the God of the Hebrews. They went to Jerusalem and got lost, and so they asked directions. They went to Bethlehem, and then they went home by another route. Whatever the situation, they looked and followed, persevered and searched until they found the source. The promise of Epiphany, the promise of the light that led to Bethlehem, is that God's light will lead us to love and wonder and hope. It's a new year. We can look for the light of God in every circumstance of this year, in every interchange, in every day of 2013. And so what will we choose? Will we look to the light? Or will we look down every dead end that life brings to us? I can almost guarantee us that we'll get stuck or lost during this year. When we do, will we be in despair and cynical, or will we ask for direction? We have choices each day to seek guidance and light, or to decide that it just doesn't exist for us. Will we offer our light to each other, our stories, our testimonies of God's breakthroughs? You know, we can find an epiphany in others' light as well. And if we choose to follow the light, we too become the light, the manifestation of God, the reflection of God's glory, and a light to others. I want to share with you this prayer from the New Zealand Book of Common Prayer to close. Jesus, as we travel far and fast, lead our minds back to the Magi, following your star, and forward to the day when we all see your shining light. Jesus, light of the world, let your bright star stand over the place where the poor have to live. Lead our eager sages to wisdom and our rulers to reverence. O God, by the leading of a star, you reveal your Jesus to the Gentiles. Grant that your church may be a light to the nations, so that the world may come to the splendor of your glory. Amen. When the holiday is over and the night looms in front of us, I hope that we will do as the Magi did, that we will step out into the dark, trusting that the light is still there to be found for us. Amen. Changed. And so, the God in whom I trust will lead us to new revelations, new light, new direction for the church, for the people of God. An Epiphany. Today, of course, the church around the world celebrates this Epiphany Sunday. An epiphany, as we use in common parlance, means a visible manifestation, particularly a manifestation. We don't really wait for the baby Jesus, because the baby Jesus came a long time ago. We wait for a new realization of the Christ born in us. So on this Epiphany Sunday, we don't really watch the night sky for that wandering star to grace the heavens to light our way as it did for the Magi. But I do hope that we'll watch for something. That we'll seek something of God's direction to be revealed to us, given to us, shown to us as we traverse our way to a new birth of Christ. In our biblical Epiphany story, this journey and the guidance to find God's revelation in Jesus is symbolized by the journey of the Magi and the presence of the light, the star. Now, the Magi, and we hear this many ways. We three kings, the three wise men. First of all, we don't know if there were three. There may have been 30. We don't. Welcome to this new year. This time, I hope and pray of new insights. We know that it's a new world. Things have changed. The world, as Alice Walker reminds us, has a station of God among us. An insight, a realization, even perhaps a call by God in us and through us. Manifestation, a new understanding, a surprise, a new learning. Light on the subject, as it were. A vision of God's presence, God's glory. And as I suggested in the Chimes message this week, just as during Advent,